There are many times where I did not get the outcome that I wanted. But what I learned is it's less about the outcome you wanted and more about, are you proud of the effort you put in to try to get that outcome? And I'll give you an example. I remember one young man, I used to drive 2 hours and meet him every single week. And every single week, I'd go out and I'd be like, hey, you told me you're going to take your TAPE test, your GED. How'd that go? And he was like, I was going to do it, but life got in the way. I said, man, you don't work? Like, what got in the way, right? And then I would drive back there the next week. I was like, hey, you're going to do some job applications. Tell me where you applied. And he's like, oh, man, you know how it goes. Why don't you just do it for me? We did this for 3.5 months, made little to no progress. I kid you not, 4 years later, I'm in a whole nother city, a whole nother job. I get a random email, and it's this kid, now not a kid anymore, telling me, I got a job at Panera, I got a job at Target, hey man, I even got a family, I got a little girl. And the last line he said, I just want to let you know I'm doing okay. I even responded. I was like, hey, man, that's what I'm talking about. I'm proud of you. You know, he never responded to me again. Even though in those moments when I was driving out there, I wasn't getting the outcome that I wanted, I stayed committed to doing the things that I thought would encourage the outcome I wanted. And there's peace in that. There's belief in that. That will give you the energy. So it's less about, am I getting the things I want, or am I proud of what I'm doing and try to get the things I want. So unfortunately, yeah, more times than I would want to think about. When the young people we were working with, that if something came on the news, that was most likely one of our clients. And I remember the first time I was working in probation, I went like 3 months without a kid getting arrested. And then finally, a kid got arrested, so I rushed to the JPO office. I'm like, hey, what are we going to do about this? Do I need to stand up in court? Hey, let's make it happen. Let's try to fix this. And I remember the JPO looked at me, laughed, looked at their coworker, laughed, and said, oh, he must be new here. Right? So it's a fine line because we don't want to get desensitized to the work that we do. Because then that emotional empathy piece is going to go away. But we also can't take credit for other people's choices. You can do everything right, and someone can still make the wrong choice. You can do everything wrong, and someone can make the right choice. So it really goes back to, okay, what can I learn from this experience? How does it make me feel? And can I be proud of how it remade me? Or do I let it ruin me? And this is a decision we have to make every single day, especially when we face adversity. So it was funny, I was doing a workshop for leaders, and I remember the one gentleman, when I shared this with him, he was like, well, what do you want me to do? Because my wife, she just keeps talking about problems, and it's problem after problem, and she's saying the same problem. So I got to tell her the solution. What do you want me to do? And like in unison, 5 women that were there, all at the same time go, it's because you're not listening. She kept saying the same problem over and over because she didn't feel heard. So the very first thing is, it's kind of the expression, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. It's why we'll reject like advice from doctors, even though we know logically they know more medically than us. It's because, do I feel that you truly care about my well-being? Because you want me to do something hard, which is change. If you're giving advice, that's an element of change. I got to know you care. The other part of it is part of them has to feel that it's also their idea. Because if it's only yours, when it doesn't work, they can constantly point the finger out. You want them to point the finger in and look in the mirror. One quick example of this, I had this one young man. He's like, I ain't working nowhere but construction. I'll do a construction job, but that's it, like demanding to me, right? I had like a special place in my heart for him. So you know what? I made a call. I made a connection to this construction place. I said, hey, give him a chance. I know, it could look a little crazy. Just give him a chance, right? So I got him the job. Pull up at his house to take him there on his first day. He sits in the car and he goes, man, Mr. Curtis, I got to be honest with you. And first of all, when somebody says that, I'm like, what does that even mean? You've been lying up until this point? Let's be honest. He's like, I went out last night and we were smoking and drinking, so I ain't gonna pass the drug test. Everything in me want to be like, you, right? I even told him, I was like, hey man, go back in the house real quick. Just go back in the house. Because I knew emotionally, I'm not going to do the things that encourage change in that moment. I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to do the things that encourage compliance, right? Let's call your PO and let's tell how, right? You know? So I said, go back in the house. While he's in the house, I called a construction place and I'm like, hey, do not hire him. Do not put him through the hiring process, but can I still bring him by so he can kind of get a feel for what it's like? And because I had a connection, he was like, all right, that's cool. Bring him by. The kid does phenomenal. The crew loves him. He's one of the hardest working ones out there. They were like, hey, man, when you going to work here, man? You're going to be great. So then I'm taking him home. He's in this positive moves, good spirits. He's like, yeah, man, I was doing it. They even said they wanted to hire me. I was like, that's what I heard, man. They want you to hire you. Yeah. I was like, well, what do you know about workers' comp? Like when you work construction, what do you know about workers' comp? He's like, what's that? I said, well, what happens is if you get hurt on the job, there's a bunch of processes they have to follow, and one of them is taking a drug test. And then I just let that sit. I didn't say anything else. And he goes, you're telling me that if I didn't smoke, I could have this job today? And of course, I'm thinking, yeah, But he had to come to that realization on his own and connect the dots. Then he said, hey, can we stop at CVS so I can pick up a couple like drug tests at home, drug tests, so I can monitor and get myself clean? He wanted to take a step towards action because in his moment, he had that, oh, this is why the advice matters. It's a lot of work on the front end. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot, but it's more sustainable than, don't you realize you shouldn't be doing that type of approach? Such a great question, important question. So there's a couple elements. It's a nuanced answer. And by the way, all of these questions, there is no, I don't know if you've ever been in a workshop like this before, but do these 3 things and you can change people's minds. Do these 2 things and you'll be a millionaire, right? No. Life is very, very nuanced, right? I will say the first thing is you have to be honest with yourself is, can I empathize with this person? Because if you can't, you're not truly going to be able to help them. And I'll give you an example of this. Is I've worked with almost every single population, but the one population I refuse to work with is people who hurt kids. So like human trafficking was something I could never. I worked at a group home and they had I still remember this, and that's just like, I got to leave this job because they had gang members send girls into the group home to recruit other girls. And this is like 14, 15-year-old. And in that moment, in almost every single situation, rob, steal, battery, whatever, I was like, let's empathy, let me understand what's happening. In that moment, I was angry. I couldn't do it. So the very first thing is you got to ask yourself, can I practice empathy in this situation? Because if I can't, I'm not going to be able to inspire change. Now, if you can, then the next thing is maybe this is a really hard way. This is hard for me, but which empathy can I practice? Because maybe emotionally you can't get there with them because you're like, this kind of triggers me. But can you get there cognitively? And in almost every scenario I can, because all cognitive empathy is I want to try to see what the world looks like from your perspective. I want to understand what the motivations are, what led to these thoughts and attitudes that you have. Because I know if I can get there, I have a better chance to inspire new ideas. So it's asking yourself, in this moment, can I take a genuine interest in seeing what their world looks like, not how does what they're doing make me feel? If what they're doing makes you feel overrides your ability to empathize, then maybe you tag somebody else in, or maybe you say, hey, is there another population? You just got to be really honest with yourself. Because one of the worst things you can do is say, I'm trying to help this person, but then do things that actually hurt them. There's no change in that, right? So empathy is the foundation of everything. If you can't practice empathy, then kind of maybe ask yourself, why? Well, what can I do to potentially get there? Another example is like if you're working with someone who's homeless and you're like, I don't know why you don't just get a job and get your butt on the street. Like, what is your problem, right? Go volunteer at a homeless shelter. You'll start to be able to practice a little empathy then. You'll start to see, and there'll be these eye-opening experiences, which then might put you in a better position to kind of be able to get there. These are one of the best questions I've ever heard in my life. So the first thing is, like, sometimes people, like, give you advice. Like, someone might give you advice, like generic advice. They'll say, just don't take it personal. Okay, here's the main thing. This is just my background in psychology, so here's some psychology for you. All the decisions you make are ultimately decided by the emotional part of your brain. Even if you look at things as logically as you can, all the data, and you're like, all right, I feel good about this decision, feeling good and confident about the data ultimately is an emotion, right? So saying that you're not going to feel how you feel or you're wrong for how you feel is just a false premise, right? That's like if you're in a relationship and you're upset and your partner tells you, you know, you really shouldn't be mad. It's about to go down. Don't tell me how to feel. Feelings are not right or wrong. So you should validate how people feel because people get to feel however they want to feel. Now, the next thing, though, that's important is what do you do in response to those feelings? Because then that is what you get to control, right? So the idea is can I think beyond my initial reaction? I'm upset, I'm pissed, I'm angry, I want to cry, I want to punch someone in the face. All those feelings are valid. But then what do? That's where it really defines is who you are and the type of impact you're going to have on people. Let's say you find yourself really emotionally dragged down and burnt out. Are you seeking out ways to better process what you're seeing and what's happening? Are you taking advantage of mental health resources? Are you journaling? Are you doing some of these best practices so that you don't burn out? Are you focusing on the things you want to control, or are you just saying, this makes me feel bad? Change happens in the reaction after the emotion, not just the emotion, because you are going to feel a certain way.
Let's give it up for Curtis one more time.